"We don't kill humans," the speaker said into the microphone, "but they sure have no fucking problem killing us." Captain Charles Thomas, aged 45 years, watched the cadets' faces turn pale and confused at his brash opening words. The 50 Space Fleet Academy trainees stared back at him, slack-jawed. He knew his swearing and confrontational tone were unexpected from a diplomatic lecture, but Charles had selected this story from his career precisely to shock these kids, force them to confront the grim realities of first contact and the knife's edge that humanity walked. Towering at the podium under the harsh auditorium lights, he flicked a switch and activated the holoprojector. A shimmering image of Earth materialized, then zoomed into 5 men standing before a sleek silver spacecraft. The young cadets murmured, recognizing it as an early model of humanity's interstellar crafts. Charles and his 4-man diplomatic team ready to embark. "Zephyrus Prime," Charles said, the star map shifting to an alien blue-green world. "Home of the Illyrians. We called it a historic summit, our first contact with extraterrestrial intelligence, but it nearly ended in extinction." He paused, letting the words linger. The cadets leaned forward. Charles manipulated the display controls. The human diplomats descended onto an alien landing pad, approaching a contingent of reptilian dignitaries. "That's Sagan, Illyrian High Counselor and our official host. A cunning son of a bitch. If you scanned his brain, you'd find genocidal maniac etched on every neuron. But we had no clue. Until the bloodbath began." The map blinked out. Darkness enveloped the room. Then blood-curdling screams filled the air. An emergency klaxon blared and vermilion lights flashed. Charles spoke over the cacophony. 23 minutes after we set foot in the Illyrian citadel, they opened fire on us. No demands, no declarations, just plasma blasts ripping through human flesh. The recording ended, silence fell. 5 Terran diplomats, locked in an alien stronghold, unarmed and betrayed. Charles's voice hardened with conviction. "But we had one advantage they didn't expect. We don't kill humans, but we sure as hell fight for them. This is the story of how we escaped that blood-soaked hellhole, outmaneuvered a technologically superior foe, and showed those Zephyrian snakes why you never fuck with humanity." The Grand Assembly Hall of the Illyrian Citadel was a sight to behold. A massive domed ceiling arched high overhead, constructed from interlocking panes of translucent crystal. The polished stone table we took our seats at was a deep, swirling blue, almost seeming to glow from within. I should have been awestruck by the alien architectural marvels surrounding us, but as the Earth's chosen representative, I couldn't afford to show anything less than unshakable confidence. So I met Sagan's gaze levelly as the wily old lizard began his presentation. "Esteemed guests," Sagan said, "allow me to welcome you to Zephyrus Prime, crown jewel of the Illyrian Empire." He gestured to a shimmering hologram that materialized above the table, displaying his homeworld in all its glory. Sleek silver towers pierced the clouds of the planet's largest city, while a latticework of glowing energy conduits crisscrossed the planet's surface. "As you can see," Sagan continued, "our species has made great strides in science and technology. Clean energy, faster than light communications, quantum computing, we have mastered them all. The Illyrian people stand ready to take our rightful place as leaders of a new galactic order." I cleared my throat, drawing the attention of the assembled dignitaries. "The people of Earth are honored by your invitation, High Counselor, and we too have much to offer." I tapped a control on the table, and a second hologram sprang to life beside Sagan's. This one showcased the towering megastructures of Tokyo and New York, the vast hydroponic farms that had greened Earth's deserts, the orbital shipyards that churned out a steady stream of exploratory vessels. In just a few short decades, humanity has gone from fossil fuels and divided nations to a unified spacefaring civilization. Our adaptability and relentless drive to explore have propelled us forward at an unprecedented pace. We view this summit not as the first step towards Illyrian dominion, but as the beginning of a new era of cooperation and mutual respect between our peoples. Sagan's reptilian eyes narrowed. I could practically hear the gears turning in his head as he reassessed us. Humanity was no longer the primitive curiosity he had thought us to be. We were a force to be reckoned with, and he was only now realizing it. As the negotiations continued, I kept a close eye on Sagan. There was something off about his body language, a tightness in his shoulders, a twitchiness to his movements. He seemed agitated, almost afraid. Suddenly a deafening boom shook the assembly hall. I reacted on instinct, lunging across the table and tackling Michael and David to the floor. Razor-sharp shards of crystal rained down around us as a second explosion ripped through the room. Through the haze of smoke and debris, I caught a glimpse of Sagan being hustled away by a phalanx of armed guards. For the briefest of moments, our eyes met, and what I saw there chilled me to the bone. It wasn't shock or anger that contorted the High Counselor's face. It was triumph. As the ringing in my ears subsided, I became aware of the dozen or so plasma rifles pointed at our delegation. The Illyrian soldiers surrounding us were shouting in their guttural language, their taloned fingers twitching on their triggers. One of them, a brute with a face like carved granite, stepped forward and grabbed me by the collar, hauling me to my feet. "Surrender, human filth," he snarled in heavily accented English. "You will pay for this treachery." "What are you talking about?" I said, keeping my voice steady with an effort of will. "We didn't do this. We're here in peace." The soldier drew back his fist, ready to pummel me into submission. But before he could strike, the doors to the assembly hall burst open again. Another group of Illyrian troops poured in, weapons raised, but they weren't pointed at us. "Stand down, Captain Crux," the leader of the newcomers barked. He was young for an Illyrian officer, with blazing orange eyes and a bearing of coiled intensity. "The humans are not responsible for this attack. There are traitors within our own ranks." Crux hesitated, his grip on my collar loosening fractionally. I pressed the momentary advantage. "Please, we have to work together to figure out what's happening. Fighting each other will only make things worse." For a long, tense moment, nobody moved. Then slowly Crux released me and lowered his weapon. The other soldiers followed suit, though they kept their eyes locked warily on us. The young officer who had intervened stepped forward, holstering his sidearm. "I am Lieutenant Zoran," he said. "My apologies for the actions of my overzealous comrade. It appears we have a situation on our hands." I looked from Zoran to Crux to the smoke-filled room, my mind racing. What the hell had we stepped into? Who had attacked the summit, and why? How deep did this conspiracy run? One thing was clear. The historic alliance we had hoped to forge with the Illyrians was balanced on the edge of a knife, and if we didn't tread very carefully, it would be humanity's blood that ended up spilled. As the adrenaline from the attack began to wear off, I took stock of our situation. Zoran and his troops had formed a protective cordon around us, their weapons at the ready, as they scanned the debris-strewn hall for any additional threats. Michael and David were shaken but unharmed, their diplomatic training holding firm in the face of this unexpected violence. Zoran approached me, his posture alert but not aggressive. "Captain Thomas, we need to get you and your team to a secure location. Please, follow me." I nodded, gesturing for my men to fall in behind the Illyrian soldiers as they led us out of the ruined assembly hall. As we navigated the twisting corridors of the citadel, I couldn't help but marvel at the advanced technology that surrounded us. Holographic displays flickered to life as we passed, showing real-time feeds of the chaos unfolding in other parts of the structure. Energy fields pulsed and shimmered along the walls, their purpose unclear, but their power undeniable. After a tense and winding journey, we arrived at a heavily guarded room deep in the heart of the citadel. Zoran ushered us inside, then sealed the door behind us with a complex series of gestures and voice commands. "Captain Thomas, I am Lieutenant Zoran, head of the Illyrian Internal Security Force," he said, his golden eyes locking with mine. "My duty is to protect the stability of our government from all threats, both external and internal. And I believe we are facing a grave internal threat indeed." He brought up a holographic display, showing a rotating insignia that resembled a trio of intertwined serpents. "The group responsible for this attack is known as the Triad of Shadows. They are a faction of Illyrian traditionalists who believe that any contact with outside species, particularly humans, will lead to the dilution and destruction of our culture and way of life. As Zoran delved into the history and ideology of the Triad, I couldn't help but see the parallels to similar extremist groups back on Earth. The fear of change, the xenophobia, the willingness to resort to violence to preserve some idealized version of purity, it was a story as old as time, played out on a galactic scale. Zoran must have sensed the direction of my thoughts, because he placed a clawed hand on my shoulder in a gesture of solidarity. "Captain, I know that your species has faced its own struggles with prejudice and extremism, but I also see in you a strength and determination that gives me hope. Together, I believe we can bring the Triad to justice and forge a path of peace between our peoples." I met his gaze, seeing the sincerity and resolve burning in those alien eyes. "Lieutenant Zoran, you have my word that my team and I will do everything in our power to help you root out this threat. The Triad's actions today were an attack not just on us, but on the very idea of cooperation and understanding between species. We cannot let that stand." As the meeting drew to a close and I prepared to rejoin Sagan and the others, Zoran pulled me aside. He pressed a small crystalline device into my hand, its surface thrumming with barely contained energy. "This is a secure communication link," he explained, "programmed to connect directly to my personal frequency. Captain Thomas, I have a feeling that your role in the events to come will be pivotal. I want you to know that you have an ally and a friend in me. No matter what challenges we will face them together." With a final clasp of hands and a nod of respect, Zoran departed, leaving me to turn the alien device over in my palm. It was a symbol of trust, a lifeline in a world that had suddenly become infinitely more treacherous and complex. I slipped the communicator into my pocket, feeling the weight of it like an anchor tethering me to this strange and perilous new reality. The path ahead was shrouded in shadows, but with Zoran at my side, I knew that humanity would not have to walk it alone. In the days and weeks that followed, Charles and his team threw themselves into the diplomatic process with renewed vigor. They spent long hours locked in discussions with Sagan and his advisors, poring over every detail of Illyrian culture, history, and technology. Despite the lingering spectre of the Triad's attack, Charles found himself forming a deep bond with Sagan. The two men, so different in appearance and background, were united by a shared passion for their peoples and a fierce determination to forge a lasting peace. But even as the talks progressed and the first tentative agreements were struck, Charles couldn't shake the feeling that they were balanced on the edge of a knife. The Triad was still out there, lurking in the shadows, and he knew that they would stop at nothing to sabotage the nascent alliance. His fears were confirmed one evening as he made his way back to his quarters after a particularly grueling negotiation session. The corridors of the Citadel were deserted at this late hour, the only sound the hum of the energy fields and the soft clink of Charles's boots on the polished stone. Suddenly the silence was shattered by the sizzle of an energy weapon. Charles ducked on instinct, the blast scorching the wall where his head had been a moment before. He spun around, adrenaline surging through his veins, to see a group of masked figures bearing down on him, their weapons glowing with deadly intent. Charles didn't hesitate. He charged forward, closing the distance before his attackers could get off another shot. He slammed into the lead assailant, grappling for control of the weapon. They crashed to the ground in a tangle of limbs, the energy rifle skittering across the floor. Charles rolled to his feet, snatching up the fallen weapon. He brought it to bear on the remaining attackers, the strange alien contours of the rifle feeling surprisingly natural in his hands. "Stand down," he barked, his voice echoing off the crystalline walls. "I don't want to hurt you, but I will if I have to." The assailants hesitated, their body language uncertain. Charles could see them weighing their options, calculating the odds. He tightened his grip on the rifle, ready for whatever came next. But before either side could make a move, a new sound filled the corridor. The thunder of booted feet and the shouts of Illyrian soldiers. Zoran burst onto the scene, his loyal troops fanning out behind him. They made short work of the remaining attackers, the brief, vicious skirmish ending as abruptly as it had begun. As the last assailant was subdued and the energy weapons confiscated, Zoran turned to Charles. "Are you all right, Captain?" he asked, concern etched into his alien features. Charles nodded, handing over the captured rifle. "I'm fine, thanks to you and your men, but who were these attackers? More of the triad." Zoran's expression turned grim. He gestured for his soldiers to remove the masks of the unconscious assailants. As the faces were revealed, Charles felt a chill run down his spine. These weren't Illyrians, they were human. "The Earth First movement," Zoran said, his voice heavy with resignation. "A radical separatist group from your own world. We've been tracking their activities for some time now, but we never imagined they would dare to strike here, in the heart of the Citadel." Charles stared at the unmasked attackers, his mind reeling. Humanity, it seemed, had its own share of extremists and xenophobes, those who would rather cling to ignorance and fear than embrace the possibilities of a new era. As he and Zoran set to work unraveling the tangled web of the Earth First movement and their Illyrian collaborators, Charles couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The forces arrayed against them were powerful and deeply entrenched, and the road ahead would be long and treacherous. The narrator's steady voice brought the cadets back to the present. That assassination attempt was only the first of many trials we would face in the weeks and months to come. The Earth First movement, we soon discovered, had been secretly collaborating with the Triad of Shadows for years, using the chaos of the initial attack to infiltrate the Citadel and sabotage the peace process from within. It was a bitter pill to swallow, realizing that some of the greatest threats to our mission came not from the Illyrians, but from our own species. There were those on Earth who saw our efforts as a betrayal, a surrender of our sovereignty and way of life. But Zoran and I refused to give in to fear or prejudice. We knew that the only way forward was together, humans and Illyrians working side by side to build a new future. And so, even as the conspiracies and counter-conspiracies grew ever more labyrinthine, we pressed on. It was a battle fought not just with weapons and ships, but with words and ideas. We had to win hearts and minds on both sides, convincing the skeptics and the hardliners that cooperation was the only path to survival. There were times when the task seemed insurmountable, when the weight of history and hatred threatened to crush us. But always, in our darkest moments, Zoran and I found strength in each other, and in the unshakable conviction that our cause was just. Looking back, I realized that those months on Zephyrus Prime were the crucible in which the Alliance was forged. The challenges we faced, the sacrifices we made, they tempered us, transformed us from two species into one united front. And though the road ahead would be long and hard, though we would face trials and tribulations beyond anything we could imagine, we would face them together. For we had learned the most important lesson of all, that in the vastness of the cosmos, no species can stand alone. That is the truth that the Earth First movement and the Triad of Shadows could never understand. And it is the truth that will carry us forward into a future brighter than any we have ever known. As the dust settled from the confrontation with the Earth First extremists, Charles found himself caught in a whirlwind of activity. Working hand in hand with Zoran and the Illyrian security forces, he threw himself into the task of rooting out the remaining conspirators and uncovering the true extent of their insidious plot. Through a grueling series of covert operations and high-stakes interrogations, a chilling picture began to emerge. The Earth First movement, it seemed, had managed to smuggle a devastating antimatter bomb into the very heart of the Citadel, with the intention of detonating it during the signing ceremony of the historic Human-Illyrian Peace Treaty. The implications were staggering. If the extremists succeeded in their plan, not only would the fragile alliance between the two species be shattered, but the resulting chaos and destruction would likely rally even more support for their xenophobic cause back on Earth. With time running out and the fate of two worlds hanging in the balance, Charles and Zoran made a fateful decision. They would lead a daring raid on the Earth First movement's hideout, a shadowy lair hidden deep in the bowels of the Citadel. As they assembled their strike team, Charles couldn't shake the sense of foreboding that gripped him. He knew all too well the risks they were taking, the sacrifices that might be required. But he also knew that there was no other choice. The stakes were simply too high. The assault on the extremists' stronghold was a desperate, brutal affair. Charles and his team fought their way through a gauntlet of booby traps and fanatical resistance, the air thick with the stench of ozone and the screams of the wounded. In the end, they emerged victorious, the antimatter bomb secured and the ringleaders of the conspiracy in custody. But the price of that victory was steep. Robert Davis, one of Charles' oldest and closest friends, lay gravely wounded, his life hanging by a thread. As the Illyrian medics worked frantically to stabilize him, Charles felt a wrenching sense of guilt and indecision. The signing ceremony was set to begin in just a few short hours, and his presence was crucial to the success of the peace treaty. Yet, how could he bring himself to leave Robert's side, knowing that his friend's sacrifice had been made in the name of the very cause they were fighting for? In that moment of quiet anguish, Charles had a sudden epiphany. True peace, he realized, was not just about grand gestures and diplomatic accords. It was about the countless small acts of compassion, loyalty, and courage that bound individuals together, regardless of their species or origin. With a heavy heart, he entrusted Robert's care to the skilled hands of the Illyrian doctors. Then, squaring his shoulders and taking a deep, steadying breath, he turned and strode towards the assembly hall, determined to see this thing through to the end. No matter the cost. As Charles took his place beside Sagan at the signing ceremony, the weight of the moment bore down on him. The assembly hall filled to capacity with dignitaries from both worlds. Hope, uncertainty, and exhaustion etched their faces. Sagan prepared to deliver his opening remarks, but a sudden commotion erupted at the back of the hall. To Charles's shock and horror, Robert, his wounded friend, stumbled into the room. He clutched a strange device in his trembling hand. Before anyone could react, Robert activated the device. A blinding flash of light engulfed the entire hall, searing Charles's retinas. He shielded his eyes, crying out in pain and confusion. When the searing whiteness finally faded, Charles blinked away the after-images. He found himself and the other delegates transported to an alien landscape. Towering spires of obsidian pierced the blood-red sky. Pulsing veins of energy crisscrossed the barren ground. A figure materialized before them, emerging from the shadows. Charles's blood ran cold as he recognized the infamous warlord Xandar from the Illyrian history books. Xandar had been exiled to a distant dimension centuries ago, yet here he stood, eyes blazing with madness and ambition. "I have used the chaos of recent events to engineer my return," Xandar declared, his voice booming across the desolate plain. "And now, with the help of my loyal followers, the triad of shadows and Earth-first movement, I will conquer both the Illyrian and human worlds." As if on cue, armies of twisted creatures shimmered into existence around Xandar. Illyrians and humans, their bodies warped by dark energies, brandished wicked-looking weapons. Robert stood among them, his face a mask of smug triumph. The terrible realization hit Charles like a gut punch. Robert, his trusted friend, had betrayed them. He'd been secretly working with Xandar all along. Charles and Sagan exchanged a look of despair. They had no weapons, no means of escape. Against Xandar's host, they seemed powerless to stop the warlord's insane plan. But even in that darkest moment, Charles refused to surrender. He'd come too far, fought too hard to let it end like this. Drawing on every ounce of determination and resourcefulness he possessed, Charles turned to face Sagan and the other delegates. "We have to stand together," he shouted over the rising wind. "It's our only chance." Sagan hesitated for only an instant. Then, his jaw set with resolve, he reached out and clasped Charles's hand. One by one, the other delegates followed suit, forming an unbroken chain of human and Illyrian alike. As their hands joined, Charles felt a strange energy begin to build within the circle, a power born of unity, compassion, an unbreakable spirit that transcended species or origin. It surged through him, raw and exhilarating, gathering force with each passing second. With a deafening roar, the energy exploded outward in a blinding wave of light. It slammed into Xandar's armies like a physical blow, shattering their ranks, sending the twisted creatures flying. Xandar himself staggered back, his face contorted in mingled shock and rage. The warlord raised his arms, dark energies crackling around him as he tried to rally his troops for a counterattack. But it was too late. The tide had turned. Charles felt the power of their united will flow through him, inexorable and unstoppable. He fixed his gaze on Xandar, pouring every ounce of that energy into a single, focused thought. "You will not win. We will not let you." Xandar's warped armies lay shattered, their twisted forms fading into the strange, fractured reality of his pocket dimension. Charles staggered, his breath coming in ragged gasps as the adrenaline of battle began to fade. Around him, the other delegates looked equally spent, their faces etched with a mix of exhaustion and disbelief at what they had just accomplished. But even as they struggled to catch their breath, a new realization began to dawn on them. They had defeated Xandar, yes, but in doing so, they had trapped themselves in his realm, cut off from their own worlds with no clear way back. "We need to find a way out of here," Sagan said, his voice strained but determined. "Our people need us, the peace treaty." Charles nodded, his mind already racing through the possibilities. But before he could speak, a shimmering figure emerged from the swirling mists that surrounded them. Clad in robes of silver and blue that seemed to ripple and flow like liquid starlight, the figure approached them with an air of ancient wisdom and power. Charles and Sagan exchanged a wary glance, instinctively moving to shield the other delegates, but Nexus raised a hand in a gesture of peace, his eyes shining with a light that was at once calming and intensely focused. "Xandar's actions have torn at the very foundations of existence," Nexus explained, his words heavy with urgency. "The delicate balance between dimensions has been disrupted, threatening to unravel all of creation. If we do not act quickly, all will be lost." "What can we do?" Charles asked, a new sense of purpose rising within him even as the scale of the threat began to sink in. "You must embark on a journey across the prime dimensions," Nexus said, his robes shimmering as he gestured to the swirling portal that had begun to form behind him. "In each realm, you must find and claim one of the 7 keys of creation, ancient artifacts of immense power, which together hold the key to restoring balance and saving your worlds." Charles looked to Sagan and the others, seeing the same determination and resolve hardening in their eyes. They had come too far, fought too hard to turn back now. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, for the sake of all they held dear. "We're ready," Charles said, his voice steady and clear. "Lead the way." Nexus nodded, a hint of a smile playing across his ageless features. Then, with a sweep of his hand, he opened the portal fully, revealing a swirling maelstrom of color and light beyond. Charles took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the multiverse itself pressing down on his shoulders. Then, with a final nod to Sagan and the others, he stepped forward into the unknown. As they emerged into the first of the prime dimensions, a realm of impossible geometries and mind-bending vistas, Charles could feel the eyes of countless billions upon them, the hopes, dreams and fears of entire civilizations, all riding on the success of their mission. But even as the enormity of their task threatened to overwhelm him, Charles felt a new sense of clarity and purpose rising within him. They had been chosen for this, he realized, chosen by fate or chance or some higher power he could not yet understand. And though the road ahead would be long and fraught with peril, he knew that they would not rest until they had seen their mission through to the end, no matter the cost. For in this strange and treacherous new reality, one thing remained certain. The fate of the multiverse itself hung in the balance, and only they could tip the scales towards salvation. As Charles and Sagan stepped through the shimmering portal, they found themselves plunged into a world unlike any they had ever seen. The third dimension was a realm of endless oceans, where vast cities of coral and pearl glittered beneath the waves. The merpeople who inhabited this watery domain were a proud and ancient race, their sleek scaled bodies perfectly adapted to life in the depths. But they were also a people divided, torn between rival factions vying for control of the underwater kingdom. Charles and Sagan soon found themselves caught in the middle of this complex web of alliances and betrayals, as they sought to win the trust of the merpeople and obtain the key of the deep. They navigated the treacherous currents of mer politics, using their wits and diplomacy to forge fragile alliances and outmaneuver their rivals. In the end, it was Sagan's keen understanding of the merpeople's culture and Charles's unwavering determination that secured their victory. They emerged from the depths with the key in hand, ready to face the next challenge. But the fifth dimension proved to be an even greater test of their skills and resolve. This was a realm of cold, harsh beauty, where towering spires of gleaming metal pierced the sky and vast networks of energy pulsed beneath the surface. The dimension was home to a race of hyper-intelligent machines, beings of pure logic and calculation, who saw organic life as little more than a resource to be exploited and assimilated. Charles and Sagan found themselves locked in a battle of wits and will with these relentless foes, as they sought to secure the key of logic. It was a struggle that pushed them to the very limits of their mental and physical endurance. The machines were faster, stronger, and more advanced than any enemy they had faced before. But Charles and Sagan refused to give in, drawing on their combined knowledge and experience to outmaneuver and outsmart their mechanical adversaries. In the end, it was a daring gambit that won the day. Charles, using his deep understanding of the machine's programming, managed to introduce a subtle flaw into their logic systems, causing them to turn on each other in a cascading failure of reason and purpose. In the chaos that followed, Sagan was able to retrieve the key, and the two heroes made their escape. As they journeyed on through the dimensions, Charles and Sagan grew ever closer, their bond forged in the heat of battle and tempered by the weight of their shared destiny. They came to rely on each other completely, each drawing strength and inspiration from the other's presence. But their greatest test was yet to come. The seventh dimension was a realm of pure chaos, a place where the very fabric of reality was torn and twisted beyond all recognition. Here, the laws of physics and reason held no sway, and the only constant was the ever-present threat of madness and despair. As they entered this nightmarish domain, Charles and Sagan could feel the dimension's malevolent energy seeping into their minds and souls, seeking to corrupt and destroy all that they were. They were assailed by visions of their deepest fears and darkest desires, tempted by the promise of power and the lure of surrender. But through it all they clung to each other and to their mission, drawing on the strength of their bond to resist the Chaos Dimension's insidious influence. In a final, desperate battle against the Guardians of the Key of Chaos, they pushed themselves beyond the brink of endurance, fighting with a savage fury born of pure determination and unyielding will. In the end, it was Charles who struck the final blow, his hand closing around the key even as the Guardians fell before him. But as he and Sagan turned to make their escape, they were suddenly confronted by a figure from their past. Robert, once their trusted friend and ally, now stood before them, his eyes blazing with a mad light and his face twisted into a mask of pure malice. In his hand, he held the keys that Charles and Sagan had fought so hard to obtain. "Did you really think it would be that easy?" Robert sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "You fools have played right into my hands. Now the power of the multiverse is mine to command." With a cruel laugh, Robert snatched the final key from Charles's grasp and disappeared into a swirling vortex of energy, leaving the two heroes stranded in the Chaos Dimension, their mission seemingly in ruins. But even in that moment of despair, Charles refused to give up hope. He turned to Sagan, his partner and friend, and together they vowed to find a way back, to stop Robert and Xandar, and to save the multiverse from the brink of annihilation, no matter the cost. "We've come too far to let it end like this," Charles said, his voice filled with grim determination. "Nexus brought us together for a reason. We have to believe that there's still a way to make things right. Sagan nodded, his eyes gleaming with the same fierce resolve. Then let us find that way, my friend. Let us show Robert and Xandar the true strength of our bond and the power of the multiverse itself. Together they turned to face the swirling chaos of the seventh dimension, ready to begin the next stage of their journey. The path ahead was uncertain, and the dangers vast, but they knew that as long as they had each other, there was no obstacle they could not overcome. The narrator's voice took on a somber tone as he recounted the darkest moment of Charles and Sagan's journey. Stranded in the chaos dimension, their hopes of saving the multiverse seemingly dashed, Charles and Sagan felt the weight of despair bearing down on them. The twisted, fractured landscape pulsed with malevolent energy, its corrupting influence seeping into their minds and souls. They stumbled through the swirling madness, their senses assaulted by nightmarish visions and distorted echoes of their own thoughts. Charles fell to his knees, his face contorted in anguish, as he saw his deepest fears and regrets played out before him in vivid, tormenting detail. Sagan, his scales dulled and his eyes haunted, struggled to remain upright, his clawed hands clenched in a futile effort to maintain his grip on reality. But just as they were about to succumb to the dimension's maddening influence, a blinding flash of light pierced the gloom. From the radiance emerged a group of ethereal beings, their forms shimmering and shifting like quicksilver. They were the etheri, enigmatic creatures who existed outside the confines of the multiverse, watching over its many worlds like silent guardians. The etheri surrounded Charles and Sagan, their presence a soothing balm to the chaos that threatened to consume them. With gentle touches and whispered words, they drew the two heroes back from the brink of madness, their minds and spirits gradually healing under the etheri's celestial influence. As Charles and Sagan regained their senses, the lead etheri, a being of pure light and energy, spoke to them in a voice that resonated through their very souls. "Charles, Thomas, and Sagan of the Illyrians," it said, "we have watched your journey with great interest and admiration. Your unwavering determination and selflessness in the face of unimaginable adversity have proven you worthy of our aid." The etheri revealed the true nature of the threat they faced. Robert's actions had not only disrupted the balance of the multiverse, but had also awakened an ancient, malevolent entity known as the Void. This primordial force sought to consume all of creation, plunging it into eternal darkness and oblivion. To stop the Void and restore balance, the etheri explained, you must journey to the heart of the multiverse itself, the nexus of all things. There, at the convergence of all realities, you will face your final test and decide the fate of all existence. With renewed purpose and the guidance of the etheri, Charles and Sagan embarked on the most perilous leg of their journey yet. They traversed the uncharted reaches of the multiverse, witnessing wonders and horrors beyond their wildest imaginations. Stars were born and died before their eyes. Civilizations rose and fell in the blink of an eye, and the very fabric of reality shifted and warped around them. As they drew closer to the nexus, the forces of the Void rose up to meet them. Armies of twisted, corrupted beings, their forms a nightmarish fusion of flesh and darkness, sought to bar their path and extinguish the last hopes of the multiverse. Charles and Sagan fought with a savage fury, their skills and resolve pushed to the utmost limits as they battled through the Void's minions. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of struggle and sacrifice, they reached the nexus of all things. It was a place of raw, primal power, a swirling maelstrom of energy and light, where the very essence of creation danced and swirled in an endless, intricate pattern. And there, at the center of it all, stood Robert, his once human form now a grotesque mockery of life, twisted and warped by the power of the keys and the influence of the Void. Charles and Sagan knew that this was their final confrontation, the moment upon which the fate of the multiverse would be decided. They steeled themselves for the battle to come, drawing strength from the countless lives they had touched and changed throughout their journey. As they faced their former friend and ally, now a vessel for the Void's malevolent will, they could feel the hopes and dreams of all existence at their backs, lending them courage in their darkest hour. The clash was titanic, a battle of will, skill, and raw power that shook the very foundations of the Nexus. Charles and Sagan fought with a desperate, unyielding determination, pouring every ounce of their strength and resolve into the struggle. The multiverse itself seemed to tremble and warp around them, the boundaries between realities blurring and fracturing under the strain of their monumental conflict. But even as they pushed themselves to the brink of their limits, Charles and Sagan knew that they were not alone, for in that moment they could feel the presence of all those they had fought to protect, the countless billions of lives across the multiverse that had been touched and changed by their actions. It was as if the very essence of those lives flowed through them, strengthening their resolve and guiding their hands as they unleashed the full power of their combined will. With a final desperate surge of energy, Charles and Sagan channeled the primal forces of the Nexus itself, merging their own indomitable spirits with the fundamental essence of creation. In a blinding flash of light and a deafening roar of energy, they shattered the Void's hold over Robert and the multiverse, banishing the malevolent entity back into the depths of oblivion from whence it came. As the maelstrom of power subsided, Charles and Sagan stood amidst the swirling energies of the Nexus, their forms battered and drained, but their spirits unbroken. Robert lay before them, his twisted form reverting to its original human state as the last vestiges of the Void's influence drained away. In that moment of triumph and exhaustion, Charles and Sagan— "It's all falling apart," Charles said, his voice heavy with despair. "Everything we fought for, everything we sacrificed, it was all for nothing." Sagan placed a clawed hand on his friend's shoulder, his own eyes reflecting the same anguish. "We did everything we could, Charles. We stopped Robert and the Void, but the damage they inflicted was too great. The multiverse is dying, and there's nothing we can do to stop it." As they stood there, watching the last remnants of creation crumble around them, a shimmering figure emerged from the chaos. It was one of the Aetheri, its form flickering and fading like a candle in the wind. "Charles Thomas, Sagan of the Illyrians," the Aetheri said, its voice a whisper on the edge of silence. "You have fought bravely and sacrificed much, but the multiverse cannot be saved. Not as it is now." Charles turned to face the ethereal being, a flicker of hope sparking in his chest. "What do you mean? Is there a way to stop this?" The Aetheri nodded, its form shimmering with a soft, pulsing light. "There is one last hope, one final chance to save the countless lives you have touched, but the price is steep." Sagan stepped forward, his eyes narrowed. "Whatever it is, we will pay it. We have come too far to turn back now." The Aetheri seemed to smile, a flicker of warmth in its fading essence. "To initiate a reboot of the multiverse, to start anew from the very beginning, you must sacrifice yourselves. Your essence must become the seed from which the new multiverse will grow." Charles and Sagan exchanged a glance, a lifetime of shared struggles and triumphs passing between them in an instant. They knew, deep in their hearts, that this was the only way. With tears in their eyes and a final fierce embrace, they made their decision. They would give their lives so that the multiverse could be reborn, so that the countless beings they had met and loved could have a new beginning, free from the shadows of the past. As they stepped into the heart of the Nexus, their forms began to dissolve, their essence merging with the primal energies of creation. In their final moments, they saw the faces of all those they had touched, the Illyrians, the delegates, the beings from across the multiverse, and they knew that their sacrifice would not be in vain. With a blinding flash of light, the multiverse was reborn, a new tapestry of worlds and possibilities woven from the threads of Charles and Sagan's essence. Though they were gone, their legacy would live on, in the stories and legends told of their deeds, in the hearts and minds of those they had inspired, and in the very fabric of the new multiverse itself. As the scene faded, Charles's voice, now that of the narrator, spoke softly, a hint of bittersweet nostalgia in his tone. It was a journey filled with pain and loss, with sacrifices made and bonds forged in the heat of battle. But through it all, one thing remained constant, the strength and resilience of the human spirit, the unbreakable bonds of friendship and love that tied us together across the vast reaches of the multiverse. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.